Muharram is not just the first month of the Islamic calendar. It is one of the holiest months in Islam, second only to Ramadan. Its significance is deeply rooted in both historical and spiritual meanings. The very name of Muharram means forbidden, signifying that warfare and violence were traditionally prohibited during this sacred month. It's a time for reflection, piety, and heightened devotion to Allah. The Prophet Muhammad emphasized its sanctity, stating that it is one of the 4 sacred months that Allah has designated. Muslims are encouraged to increase their acts of worship, perform extra prayers, fast, give charity, and seek forgiveness in this month. What makes Muharram particularly special is not only its spiritual depth, but also the timeless lessons it carries of justice, patience, and sacrifice. It's a chance to renew one's intentions, to draw close to Allah, and to remember that time itself is a gift that must be used wisely. Fasting during the month of Muharram is highly recommended, especially on the 10th day known as Ashura. The Prophet Muhammad, said that fasting on the day of Ashura expiates the sins of the previous year. It was a day the Prophet himself fasted, and it was a tradition even before Islam, followed by earlier prophets such as Musa. When the Prophet migrated to Medina and saw the Jews fasting on Ashura, he acknowledged the significance and declared, "We have more right over Musa than them," and encouraged Muslims to fast. To distinguish the Islamic fast from others, he recommended fasting on the 9th or 11th as well. This act of fasting symbolizes devotion, gratitude, and a commitment to purify oneself. It's not just about abstaining from food and drink, but about detaching from worldly distractions, focusing on one's spiritual connection with Allah, and seeking forgiveness for past shortcomings. Muharram also holds immense historical importance, particularly due to the tragic events of Karbala that occurred on the day of Ashura in the year 61 AH. It was on this day that the beloved grandson of Prophet Muhammad, Imam Hussain ibn Ali, along with his family and loyal companions, were brutally martyred by the forces of Yazid. Imam Hussain stood against tyranny, corruption, and injustice, and refused to pledge allegiance to a ruler who went against the teachings of Islam. His stand was not for power or personal gain, but for the preservation of the true values of Islam. The sacrifice of Karbala is remembered not just for its tragedy, but for the courage, righteousness, and unwavering faith displayed by Imam Hussain and his companions. Muharram, therefore, is a month of mourning and remembrance, but also one of inspiration, a reminder to always stand for truth, no matter the cost. The message of Karbala resonates with all of humanity, regardless of sect or background. It transcends time, culture, and geography. Imam Hussein's stand at Karbala was a universal declaration that truth must prevail over falsehood, justice over oppression, and dignity over humiliation. His unwavering faith and resistance in the face of overwhelming adversity have inspired generations of Muslims to rise against injustice. Muharram invites believers to reflect on their own lives, to examine whether they are standing on the side of truth and whether they have the courage to make sacrifices for righteousness. It challenges one's inner self and calls for moral introspection. In a world filled with injustices, the story of Karbala becomes a timeless beacon of resistance and moral clarity. The month of Muharram is not just a historical commemoration, it's a spiritual awakening that encourages the soul to stay firm on the path of Islam, no matter how dark the circumstances may appear. Apart from Karbala, Muharram is filled with other stories of divine mercy and miracles. Many Islamic historians and scholars believe that numerous significant events happened in this sacred month. It is reported that on the day of Ashura, Allah saved Prophet Musa and the Israelites from Pharaoh by splitting the sea. It is also said to be the day when Prophet Nuh rested on Mount Judy after the Great Flood. These events show that Ashura is a day of divine intervention, victory for the oppressed, and defeat for the tyrants. It's a day that demonstrates Allah's ultimate control over everything. Reflecting on these miracles, one is reminded that those who remain steadfast in their faith will be aided by divine help, no matter how dire the situation. Muharram thus becomes a month to revisit these stories of resilience and mercy, reinforcing faith in Allah's plan and power. In Muharram, acts of charity and kindness carry greater spiritual rewards. Given its sacred status, scholars have often encouraged Muslims to increase their generosity during this month. This includes feeding the hungry, caring for orphans, giving financial support to those in need, and showing mercy to all of Allah's creation. These acts not only reflect the spirit of Islam, but also echo the legacy of Imam Hussain, who even in his final hours offered compassion and concern for others. When one gives in the way of Allah during this month, it becomes a step towards purification of the soul. Kindness, forgiveness, and humility are virtues that define a true believer, and Muharram provides the perfect time to cultivate these qualities. It's not just about mourning the past, but about living the values for which the martyrs of Karbala gave their lives. True remembrance is shown through action, compassion, and a heart that beats for justice. The beginning of the Islamic year with Muharram reminds Muslims that time is a trust from Allah. As the first month, it sets the spiritual tone for the rest of the year. It's a moment to renew one's intentions, seek forgiveness for past mistakes, and resolve to improve one's character and relationship with Allah. Be it for friends. Months gone, never returns, and Muharram offers a sacred opportunity to start afresh. The sanctity of this month calls for a pause in life's chaos and an internal audit of one's deeds. What goals were not achieved last year? What sins still weigh on the heart? Muharram is the door through which one can walk into a more conscious, purposeful Islamic life. As days pass swiftly, this month encourages believers not to waste time in heedlessness, but to prioritize what truly matters: obedience to Allah, sincerity in actions, and commitment to moral and ethical excellence. Another reason why Muharram is considered blessed is that it brings people together in remembrance. Across the world, Muslims gather in masjids, homes, and community centers to recite Quran, share the stories of Karbala, and perform acts of devotion. For many, it is a time of deep emotional connection to their faith, where tears flow not out of sorrow alone, but from a spiritual bond with those who sacrificed everything for Islam. These gatherings help spread the knowledge of Islamic history, teach younger generations about courage and integrity, and strengthen the communal ties of brotherhood and sisterhood in faith. Mourning in Islam is not a sign of weakness. It is a reminder of the strength of the heart that loves Allah and His chosen servants. Muharram becomes a month where the soul is not just educated but transformed. Through remembrance, it revives faith, fosters empathy, and strengthens one's identity as part of a larger ummah. In addition to remembrance and devotion, Muharram is a time to cultivate patience. The trials faced by Imam Hussain and his companions at Karbala were a masterclass in sabr, patience in the face of unimaginable hardship. Despite being outnumbered, denied water, and facing brutal death, they remained firm in their belief, never faltering. Their example teaches that true strength lies not in physical might, but in spiritual endurance. Life brings countless tests, loss, injustice, fear, and temptation. Muharram serves as a reminder that with patience and faith, every hardship can be endured and every pain has purpose. The Prophet said, "Patience is illumination," and in the darkness of Karbala, that illumination was clearly seen. Believers are called to mirror that strength in their own lives, whether facing personal struggles or societal injustices. This sacred month empowers the heart to remain resilient, calm, and trusting in Allah's wisdom, no matter what challenges arise. As one reflects during Muharram, another powerful theme that emerges is the concept of sacrifice. Imam Hussain gave up not only his life, but also the lives of his dearest family members, including his young son, for the sake of preserving the core principles of Islam. That sacrifice was not made for status, revenge, or politics. It was made for truth. In today's world, where compromise often replaces conviction, the story of Karbala is a soul-shaking reminder that there are values worth dying for. Muharram urges believers to ask themselves, what am I willing to sacrifice for my faith? Can I give up pride, ego, or wealth for the sake of Allah? True sacrifice is not always about martyrdom. It's about placing Allah above all else in daily choices. It's in those small yet sincere sacrifices where a believer proves their loyalty to Islam. Karbala's legacy calls everyone to live with meaning and die with purpose. The month of Muharram also emphasizes unity. While there are different ways of observing this month across various Islamic traditions, the core message remains the same: justice, devotion, sacrifice, and love for the Prophet's family. Instead of allowing these differences to divide, Muharram can be a force that unites. When Muslims come together in mourning and remembrance, they are reminded of what binds them: the Shahada, the Quran, and the love for Ahlul Bayt. In a world torn apart by divisions, Muharram becomes a time to heal, to reconcile, and to remember the common struggle for truth. The enemies at Karbala sought to destroy unity among Muslims, but instead they only strengthened it. Through shared pain comes shared purpose. Muharram thus serves as an annual call to rise above superficial divides, to embrace the spiritual core of Islam, and to walk together on the path illuminated by the sacrifice of Hussain and his noble family. Finally, the sacredness of Muharram should inspire a continuous journey of self-reform. It is not enough to mourn Karbala yearly without allowing its message to affect one's life. The blood of the martyrs cries out not for ritual alone, but for transformation. Their story urges the believer to be honest in prayer, fair in trade, kind in speech, and brave in truth. Muharram is a blessed month because it ignites the flame of spiritual awakening. It calls for a heart that beats for Allah, eyes that weep for justice, and a life that reflects the Prophet's teachings. The memory of Karbala should live in the way we treat others, in the courage we show in adversity, and in the purity of our intentions. This month gives every believer a mirror to see who they are and who they should become. In remembering the sacrifices of the past, we shape the righteousness of the future. Muharram's blessings are not limited to history or rituals. They extend into the realm of personal connection with Allah. During this sacred time, hearts are more tender, souls are more open, and the doors of mercy seem wider. It's a month when tears become a form of worship, and silence can carry the weight of devotion. Whether one is fasting, praying, or simply sitting in reflection, the atmosphere of Muharram invites closeness to the divine. Many believers experience spiritual breakthroughs in this month, where they reconnect with their faith after periods of negligence. It becomes easier to leave sins, develop good habits, and embrace a lifestyle centered on Allah's pleasure. This isn't merely coincidence, it's the divine energy of a blessed time at work. The serenity of Muharram teaches that transformation doesn't require grand actions, but sincere moments of surrender. When a heart turns truly toward Allah, even the smallest steps become monumental in the journey of faith. For parents and educators, Muharram presents a golden opportunity to teach the next generation about courage, faith, and morality. The stories of Imam Hussain and his family are not just tragic, they are powerful lessons in leadership, responsibility, and standing firm for what's right. When children hear about how a small group stood bravely against a mighty empire, they begin to understand the real meaning of bravery and piety. Muharram is a month to sit with our youth, to share these stories not just as history, but as guiding principles for life. They learn about the thirst of the children in Karbala, the sacrifice of Abbas, the strength of Zainab, and the silence of Ali Asghar. Their hearts absorb lessons that no textbook can teach. These tales root values of honesty, justice, and humility deep within their character. A generation raised on the spirit of Karbala will not be swayed by trends or falsehood. They will live as torchbearers of truth. Muharram also encourages deep emotional healing for many Muslims. The mourning process, often misunderstood by outsiders, is not just about sadness, it's about releasing pain, finding empathy, and connecting spiritually with the trials of the past. When one mourns for Imam Hussain and the martyrs of Karbala, they often find that their own personal griefs begin to feel lighter. This is because in connecting with the grief of the Ahlul Bayt, one learns that they are not alone in their suffering. Life is filled with losses, of loved ones, of opportunities, of dreams. Muharram shows that even the most righteous people face tremendous sorrow, yet they did not let grief defeat their faith. They turned pain into power and sorrow into submission to Allah's will. This is why many believers find peace in their tears during Muharram. It becomes a spiritual medicine, allowing hearts to weep, release, and ultimately heal under the mercy of Allah. In today's modern world, where distractions are endless and time often slips away unnoticed, Muharram stands as a sacred pause, a spiritual interruption in the chaos. It redirects attention from worldly attachments to eternal truths. While people chase wealth, fame, and pleasure, Muharram whispers a different message, that life is fleeting, and only what is done for Allah will endure. The month trains the believer to detach from the temporary and reconnect with the everlasting. It redefines what success means. not in material gains, but in moral victories and spiritual integrity. In a society where speaking the truth can cost popularity, where resisting injustice is uncomfortable, the legacy of Muharram empowers the believer to live boldly. It invites a higher standard of living, one not guided by desire, but by devotion. Those who truly absorb the message of Muharram often find themselves re-evaluating their goals, shedding their ego, and stepping into a more purposeful, principled way of life. The influence of Muharram also extends to strengthening our bond with the Quran. The themes reflected in the story of Karbala, truth, sacrifice, patience, and reliance on Allah, are echoed throughout the Holy Quran. Muharram serves as a powerful reminder that the Quran is not just a book of recitation, but of action. Imam Hussein's stand was deeply rooted in Quranic principles. His life was a living tafsir, an interpretation of the Book of Allah. Reflecting on his sacrifice encourages believers to return to the Quran with fresh eyes, seeking not just knowledge but transformation. When one opens the Quran during this month, they are more likely to see its verses come alive in the context of Karbala. The Quran speaks of the patient, the truthful, the martyrs, and the righteous, and all these qualities are embodied in the events of Muharram. Thus, the sacredness of this month inspires a renewed love and reverence for Allah's final revelation. Beyond the physical rituals and emotional expressions, Muharram plants the seeds of revolutionary thought. It challenges systems of oppression, blind obedience, and moral compromise. The martyrdom of Imam Hussain was not just an isolated event. It was a bold stand against an empire that had drifted away from the Prophet's teachings. It reminds believers that Islam is not meant to be silent in the face of wrongdoing. Muharram calls Muslims to be socially conscious, to question injustice, and to become agents of positive change. Whether it's in personal life, within families, communities, or nations, truth must always be upheld. That is the timeless echo of Karbala. Every generation must carry that flame forward. The blessed nature of Muharram isn't only in the past. It is in its power to awaken present-day hearts and stir movements that mirror the courage of Hussein. When believers remember and act, Muharram continues to live, not just as history, but as a living mission. As the month of Muharram passes, its echoes remain in the hearts of believers, reminding them that faith is not inherited but lived, that truth demands sacrifice, and that the legacy of Hussein is not just to be mourned, but to be carried forward with courage, love, and unwavering devotion to Allah.